Hello, everybody. It's me, Bigfoot, Michigan Rob. Right now, at the time of this recording, it's Wednesday. I've yet to decide if I'm going to put this as a live show later today or just have it as a video. I don't know, but this is a Thanksgiving special for all you out there. As you know, I'm not going to be doing my live show Thursday. So this is going to drop when you're watching this. It's either going to be dropped today as a video or a live. I don't know yet. I guess I'll just find out as the day goes on. But this is a happy Thanksgiving to everybody. I'm going to give you three Bigfoot stories. All three from my second book, Bigfoot Michigan Rob Presents True Cryptid Encounters, book two, that you can find on Amazon, as you all already know. Just type Bigfoot Michigan Rob, of course, in your Amazon browser, and you'll find them. Great Christmas is right around the corner, everybody. So yeah, think about it. I want to thank all of you. I'm very thankful for my audience. I'm thankful for the people in the chat room. I'm thankful for the people that just watch the shows, regardless if you're in chat or not, because you're the driving forces behind these shows. And I look forward to coming on and talking to you guys, whether it's a live show or a video. Uh, I just want to express my sincere thank you for this time of the year. Happy Thanksgiving. And I got a little special video in the background for you guys as well as these stories unfold. So I'm just going to get on with it. Happy Thanksgiving from BMR. This is Bigfoot on the Appalachian Trail. Hi, Rob. My name for this story is John. I was hiking on a well-known Appalachian Trail running through the state of Vermont with my hiking partner, Lance. It was early June. The year was 1997. We went out early to scout ahead for a camping spot, which my friend Lance and I would get together for our always year-end get-together. We have been friends since high school, and with our hectic schedules, we made a point to get caught up on life at least once per year. It was also nice as our two wives, Laura and Beth, also friends since high school, they would get together and they would catch up as well. A perfect weekend for lifelong friends. The trail that we hiked led us to a perfect spot with a magnificent view of the mountains. It had an open area backing up to the tree line with a rather nice sized stream that flowed through the campsite to provide for some hopeful good fishing. It was all set. We found the perfect spot and plan to head out that following weekend. Lance and I met at the trail early that next Friday, parked our vehicles, and proceeded on a 5 mile hike into the woods to our location. It was a beautiful morning in the lower 60-degree range, and not a cloud was in the sky. The tall trees along this part of the Appalachian Trail also provided for more than adequate shade to make the temperature even more pleasurable. The further up the trail that we hiked, Lance and I heard what sounded to be that of a large tree come crashing down to the ground just ahead of us by about 30 yards out or so. Sure enough, after another few minutes hiking, laid in the path ahead of us was a rather large tree about 30 feet long, laying across the path. Lance and I started to examine this tree. We took note that it was not an old or sick tree. It appeared healthy, very green. The odd thing was at the base of the tree, perhaps 5 feet from ground level, is where it snapped. Again, very fresh, and we took note that the barrel of this tree had to be at least 6 or 7 inches in diameter. This is very thick to be simply pushed and snapped straight down to the ground. This took some energy and extreme power, the power of no man. Hell, 50 men could not have accomplished this feat, especially how clean the break was. Lance and I stopped, kind of in awe, and we admittedly were a little bit scared. There were no hikers in our area. In fact, we suddenly realized there was not a sound in the forest, not even the chirping of a bird or smaller animals bustling about. This suddenly put a very eerie and strange sense of fear into both Lance with our demeanor. We had never heard the forest so quiet. It was like having a bunch of cotton shoved down your ear canal, or wearing headgear to muffle the sounds of gunshots at the firing range. Lance and I decided to make our way to camp, which was perhaps 1 or 2 miles ahead at the very most. Not to sound cliche, we all have heard of people's Bigfoot encounters, that feeling of being watched or even being paralleled by something while walking in the woods. I kid you not. The moment that we left the fallen tree, Lance and I experienced both those events. We looked at each other, and it seemed we read each other's minds as we put our fingers to our lips to silence each other, stop, and listen. We felt a presence, not sure enough of what it was when we walked. We heard the crackling of the underbrush flanking us to our left side. The steps were bipedal. You could almost feel the vibration beneath our feet. Again, when we stopped, the bipedal walking, or perhaps the stalking is a better word, stopped. This happened almost all the way down to our campsite. Unnerved, Lance and I quickly set up camp, sat down, and went over what we had just experienced. It was less than 10 seconds when we both started talking about Bigfoot. Lance and myself did not believe in the existence of such a creature, but like most, it was simply a passing thought, if you will. We have heard the stories and frankly viewed it was purely entertainment. However, this was not entertaining, and we believe there was a Bigfoot nearby. We believe it knocked down the tree as well as following and watching us. We still had that feeling of being watched at the camp. We had to decide if we were to turn back or wait. We decided to wait it out. Perhaps that was the wrong choice. Trying to get our minds off of the possibility of a Bigfoot stalking us, we went down to that stream I mentioned earlier in the story and tried our luck. The fishing did, in fact, calm our nerves, and that feeling of being watched, strangely but very welcomely, faded away. We landed a bunch of smaller sized trout, and now we were excited about going back to cook them up. We even started to joke about or imagine that we made up or our minds played tricked on us for this entire episode. Now, the tree knocked over was a fact, but maybe we were just spooking ourselves this entire time regarding the footfall and being watched. It was not until we returned to camp that we now know that it was a Bigfoot. Surrounding our campsite, we found huge human like footprints, or I guess you would call them tracks. They measured 22 inches long by at least 6 or 7 inches wide. There were several tracks, some more distinctive than others. The one track that really flipped our lids was the one track in particular. It was very distinctively had been pressed deeply into the ground, and you could clearly see 5 oversized toes to go along with the 22-inch length. Lance and I were kind of in shock, yet somewhat excited, if this makes any sense at all. Now we had to determine if we needed to go home or to stay. We'd gone over about alleged Bigfoot sightings, and really, we never heard of Bigfoot hurting people. So we decided to man up, at least spend one more night and see how it goes. I know you probably think this is crazy, but there was also something about this that spiked our adrenaline and our curiosity at best. Nighttime fell, and Lance and I, as the night progressed, were much more calm and we were much more relaxed. Then that stopped. Not 50 yards from camp, we heard a very loud and thunderous vocalization from an animal we had never heard before. It was almost beast like. Then, Very much like hearing the first tree crashing to the ground, a very similar huge thud smashed into the ground. Then all went silent, much like before. We sat and we waited. We sat for several hours and waited. Finally, Lance and I sprang to our feet and went to investigate what we believed was another tree being knocked over. 50 yards towards the tree line, there laying in front of us, like we thought, was another huge young tree snapped and pushed over. After a minute or so, that thunderous vocalization sounded, but it was much closer. Lance and I look deeper into the woods and see a very tall and robust shadow being eclipsed by the moon. The shadow was alive, and we saw a set of huge, yellow, glowing eyes blinking back at us. Carefully, we walked, did not run back to camp. We sat up all night long until daybreak. Lance and I are now 100% and convinced that Bigfoot does exist. Oddly enough, we did not go home. However, we did pack up our gear and headed back to our vehicle, and we found another camping spot some 30 miles away. Later that night at our new camp, we heard that thunderous vocalization again, this time much further out. We just sat and listened and finished our trip together, both realizing that Bigfoot does indeed exist. Yeah, I thought that was a great story, a pretty cool story, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. Let me take a quick sip of refreshment here. When you read for a little bit, man, the mouth does get dry. All this talking. Happy Thanksgiving if you're just joining. This is a pre-Thanksgiving video. I won't be on Thursday afternoon. This is another Bigfoot encounter. Let me change that video up a little bit. Let me know what you think about the videos I'm putting in the background. Thumbs up, thumbs down. I'm trying to enhance these for y'all. This one takes place in Estes Park, Colorado. Back during the Christmas season in 2020, my wife and family spent time at our family ranch style home outside of Estes Park in Colorado. We love the view of the mountains and forests surrounding our 2,000 square foot home. It just feels like Christmas with the snow and beautiful scenery. Typically, we spend November and December during winter, July and August during the summer at this home. We had purchased the ranch back in 2015 after successfully selling our family business in the home improvement market. Our main home is located outside of Denver. We loved owning both properties, one for relaxation, with the other keeping up with the typical hustle and bustle of the mainstream. We were fortunate enough to appreciate both lifestyles. In 2020, this was the first time since purchasing the Estes Park home that we did not arrive until the first week in December. Like I mentioned earlier, we normally spend November there, but my wife Brenda's mother became terminally ill, so we found it best to stay within a close proximity to Brenda's mom. My 23-year-old son Jake lived with us and our daughter. Our daughter's name is Anne. She was a few years older than Jake, who was married and lived on the West Coast in Los Angeles with her husband, Bob, who owns a thriving real estate business. In fact, it was Bob who found this beautiful gem at Estes Park through one of his real estate partners in Colorado. One of the best things about our home, it was private, yet we were friends with the three other homeowners on the section of land. To give you a better picture, there are four houses spread about a quarter mile in between parcels. The other three homeowners were living prior to us here, or the three other the three homeowners were living here prior to us with differing time periods from over 3 to 4 years. So we were all newer to this part of Colorado. We had privacy at the same time during the summer. It was a quick golf cart ride over to visit our neighbors or jump on a snow machine during winter. When we pulled up early that December and after settling into our home, Jake and I went off to look for a Christmas tree to cut down in our beautiful forest with the mountains serving as a backdrop to our house. Surprisingly, for this time of year, there was perhaps a foot of snow covering the ground. We revved up our Yamaha snowmobile, connected our trailer to the sleds for the tree, and off we sped. We reached the tree line, which was lined up with great prospects for my son and I to choose from. Upon our approach, I noticed footprints or tracks paralleling the tree line. What was most unusual is these tracks were not of the usual animal prints that roam the forest. These appeared to be human-like. You could actually see toes. Now, some were covered with snow being blown about the tracks, and certainly some snow had melted. Several, however, were very distinctive with a variety of sizes. I had pulled out my measuring tape and recorded sizes of 23 inches by 7 inches, 19 inches by 5, and a smaller set that was only about 11 inches by 4 inches. They were all in a straight pattern along the tree line, then turned back into the forest about 10 feet. Then the prints were gone. My son and I were excited about this finding, yet perplexed at the sudden vanishing of the tracks further into the woods. My son and I immediately started to ask each other if these were Sasquatch prints. Jake and I loved and believed in Bigfoot. In fact, my brother Steve did Bigfoot research and always was telling us about his findings. So we were very well informed on the subject. We took some pictures to show my wife and started looking for our tree. About a half hour into our search for our Christmas tree, pine cones started being tossed at us from the depths of the woods. Startled, my son and I knew this just had to be Bigfoot. We were not scared. The cones can't hurt us, and as they fell just in front of our feet from 4 to 5 feet in distance. This went on for 5 minutes at least. Then it stopped. Jake and I continued on looking for our tree to cut down. We were excited about getting our tree and even more excited to get back to tell Brenda what we had experienced. We loaded the tree to our trailer, and just before starting the Yamaha sled, a very loud and thunderous whoop was blasted out from the forest. We didn't start the snowmobile. We waited a few minutes to listen for another whoop. Nothing. Nothing more could be heard, and we started back to the ranch. I immediately told Brenda, and she shared in the excitement that extended and that was extruding from Jake and I. We calmed down a little bit and prepared dinner. Later in the evening, around 8 p.m., the moon was high and bright, and the snow glistened upon the ground. The family was sitting around our fireplace and admiring our brand new Christmas tree. Brenda said, "Honey and Jake, you have outdone yourselves on this tree." Almost immediately after Brenda praised our accomplishment, we heard again a very loud whoop from outside our home. We sat and listened, then another whoop, then another and another. There were about 5 whoops. They all had very different tones. The thing about these vocalizations is that one sounded just like the earlier ones that Jake and I had heard. The second was not quite as thunderous, perhaps a bit softer, if that makes any sense. There was also a third. The third sounded not nearly as deep at all. It had no boom, it had no bass to it. That's the best way I can describe it. Jake said, Dad, it makes sense. We saw three different sets of tracks earlier, suggesting that maybe we had a family of Sasquatch just outside our house. We all ran to our large picture window that faced the woodline. We could hear the whoops, but could not see anything. The moon did the moon did light up the snow, but still it was too dark to see. Then suddenly my son said, Mom and Dad, look. He pointed to my wife and where to look. There we saw an amazing sight. Standing outside of the tree line were three sets of glowing eye shine, that were blinking. The moon cast a shadow of three figures, all ranging from very tall to about a foot or so shorter to one who was half the size of both. This, I do believe, was a family of Bigfoot. I'm guessing a male, female, perhaps a juvenile. Putting a height on these Sasquatch, I would estimate the tallest maybe 9 foot, maybe eight, with the smaller rounding out the family and maybe 5 foot tall. So I guess a 9 footer, an 8 footer, and then the kid 5 foot. We all gazed at this amazement, and like we've all heard before, in my amazement, I did not even think to grab a camera. Then suddenly the green eyes, the eyeshine was green. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, Rob, disappeared, and you could just barely see the shadowy figures disappear back into the tree line. Again, Rob, this took place in 2020. Currently, we still own our ranch in Estes, Colorado. And despite never having a visual of these Sasquatch to our satisfaction, we from time to time over the past 3 years still hear the whoops in the distance. We all know that the Bigfoot are still close to this day. We still await our first true and clear visual. I'm sure that one day perhaps we will. I like that one, you guys. Again, this is just from, I'm not doing a show Thursday, so I just want to do this for you guys. Three quick stories from my book. Hope you like them. You have to excuse me if I'm messing up reading a little bit because you get parched with all this reading. 22 minutes, 23 minutes into this. This is the final one. Thank you for coming in. Again, thanks to everybody for subscribing for the last several years. I appreciate each and every single one of you. Without you guys, I wouldn't do this. So I appreciate all your support and your love. I'm Bigfoot, Mr. Grout. Please subscribe. Thanks, you guys, if you're new. Let's see here. The sun was just rising in my home in Garden Valley, Idaho, located in Boise County, where the Payette River flows right through the middle of the valley. It was early in the fall of 2017, and we had just received about 6 or 7 inches of snowfall. Not unusual for Idaho, yet the amount was a bit more than what I would have expected. The snow was like powder and not heavy, so I went on my back deck and brushed it away with an ordinary house broom. It was not cold, and the snow was already starting to melt away with the rise of the sun. Looking out into the back of the house, I saw a lot of animal tracks. I left the back deck to walk the property and found a bear track and a gray wolf track. I found it very strange to have these animals roam so close to the house. Yes, I've seen them on the property a handful of times, perhaps 100 yards out, but the close proximity to the house was kind of alarming. When I first moved here back at the end of 2002, the realtor and locals did tell me about being so close to the forest and mountain range in the distance to expect anything. So I was not too shocked and just figured it was only a matter it was only a matter before the elements of the wildlife would get closer than I had wanted. I do not have any pets. It's just me and my wife Amy. At this time, we were married for 10 years. The further out that I walked the property, I came across some tracks that I literally could not explain. The tracks seemed wide and long. I did not have a tape measure, but if I were to guess, maybe 20 inches long. What really floored me was what appeared to be at least two or three toe impressions. That was it. I continued to follow the tracks for several more yards before they just stopped. So up to this point, I am already kind of apprehensive. Now I'm just flat mystified and felt a little bit of anxiety start to rush my head. I went back into the house and did not tell Amy about any of my discoveries and just tried to brush it off as though it was just the wind. The snow melted away the patterns of the tracks as well. So I just left it at that. A couple of months went by, and the prior discovery slowly dissipated. The discovery of his tracks, I guess, you guys. There was no anxiety. I just kind of laughed it off. I did not know about I did know about Bigfoot as it did come into my thoughts, but I was not a really big believer of the creature and dismissed the premise early on about the tracks, the melt away on the tracks, the three toes. I was just relieved that not a bear or wolf had been near my house since the day that I first saw the tracks that morning. A fresh snow started to fall, and Amy and I put on our snowshoes and started to take a walk from our home. It was a light, billowy snowfall, not terribly cold. Amy and I enjoyed walking during these times when elements were bearable to be outdoors. We knew that in a matter of a few weeks, the temperature and snow would make it just not that bearable at all to go outside. We did have a couple snowmobiles that we enjoyed riding the trails when walking or hiking. This was not just feasible as well. We were quite a distance from the house with when those large non-animal footprints seemed to appear from out of nowhere. These were fresh and very distinctive. Amy asked Steve, by the way, that's my name, who is walking around out here? Before I could reply, she retorted, and whoever this is a huge man, and he must be crazy. Barefoot. We stopped and looked at the tracks and followed for another 20 feet when suddenly they stopped, much like the prior tracks I had found. Amy and I looked out into the distance for any sight of a person walking around. To our dismay and maybe perhaps kind of relieved, we saw nobody. But the most strange and eerie thing that I ever witnessed was about to happen to my wife and I. Directly in front of us, we noticed a bit of the powdery snow kind of puffed out, as though a person was walking through the snow, causing the disturbance from your foot to the snow top. Then, even more amazing, the footprints started to appear directly in the snow in front of us, much like the footprints that stopped earlier. Amy looked at me in bewilderment. How can this be? We both seemed to be in shock, yet for whatever the reason, we were not frightened. How can these tracks be formed without a physical presence? We continued following these tracks as they continued to puff out the snow plumes, for the lack of a better word, leaving huge footprints. So in other words, there's tracks formulating in front of this couple, you guys, and there's nothing there. They're just kind of showing up. In fact, he goes on to say the tracks kept appearing. In fact, they continued, with Amy and I trailing up the river that ran across the land. The river was not fully frozen, as it was a bit too early in the season, and the river ran briskly and fast. Chunks of broken ice could be seen flowing down the stream with considerable force. This is where the tracks ended. Amy and I stopped and stared at each other before uh, crossing the river. Actually, it says before focusing across the river. The story takes one last turn here at the other side of the river, we saw a manifestation of a huge human like figure suddenly appear. It was transparent and you could see right through it. It was not a human, yet looked not like an animal. It was extremely tall and wide. It seemed to look directly at us with what appeared to be bright blue eyes. They were way much more distinguished than the immense frame of the ghostly body. Then it turned from us, took a few steps, and disappeared. I do not know what it was. I have heard of Bigfoot being a spirit amongst the First Nations. To this day, I'm amazed at this. What did I see? But in an odd way, I do have a feel of some sort of enrichment. Thanks, Steve. Well, I hope you guys like those. It's Thanksgiving. I don't know how I'm going to publish this, whether it's to be on like a little live. It's about 30 minutes long. Again, I just did this, not doing a show Thursday. Wanted to read a few stories from the books. Hope you like them. You have to excuse me if I screwed up some of the verbiage when I was reading. I guess I need glasses. I don't know. But anyway, I love and appreciate all you guys for being subscribers throughout the years. Happy Thanksgiving. I guess in a little way, this is my thanks to you. Give me a like, thumbs up, whatever you'd like to do. I'll be on Saturday night at midnight with the girls. From BMR to you, have a happy and safe Thanksgiving.